I know I've had multiple conversations with several of you. I know you're practicing your boundaries. And so therefore, tonight, we're going to do chapter 15 and 16. But chapter 15, I am sure you are understanding right about now. And as you're getting resistance to your boundaries, I know that when you're very first practicing setting boundaries, that it would be really, really, really easy to fall back into our normal old patterns, wouldn't it? And yet we were miserable that way. We were living a boundaryless life is absolutely miserable. So none of us are going to fall back. None of us are going to tap out. None of us are going to quit. We're going to keep practicing, and we're going to be healthy. And I know individually we each have to decide to do this, but also you guys, we need one another. We need to lock arms, and when we're having a hard time, and when, as we talk about some of these resistance, as we're getting this outer resistance, you need to have someone that you can talk to. You need to have somebody that you can bounce things off of, as we'll see as we go through this. So it takes work, it takes discipline, and it takes a desire to establish and maintain boundaries. But often the desire comes from a place of pain, doesn't it? It comes from a place of having absolutely no boundaries in your life and getting railroaded and being tired and being burnt out and being all these things, wanting to get out of the spin. It comes from this kind of a pain until we finally say, all right, I want this. I want this for my life. So let's talk about some of the things that you are bound to be experiencing right now from your outer resistance as you set a boundary. Number one, the most common resistance is that you're going to get from the outside is anger. So you set your boundary up, and people who get angry at others for setting boundaries have a serious character problem. Serious character problem. They think that the world exists for them and for their comfort. Is that a little hot for you guys? Is that too loud out there? Is that okay? Okay. They think that the world exists for them and their comfort. They see others as extensions of themselves, meaning they enmesh, or in the psychology world, they call this codependency. They enmesh. They don't see, because remember what boundaries do is where I end and where you begin. But people who don't have boundaries, they enmesh. And so they get angry, they get furious. And the way they react to your no is acting like a 2-year-old. I want you all to put a 2-year-old in your mind right now. And think about when a 2-year-old doesn't get their way. Little Revy was at our house when I got home from work today. And Aurora had my older granddaughter, who's 5, and Revy is 1.5. And my older granddaughter had a sucker, a chocolate sucker, and Revy went and snatched it away from her. Well, Rue is 5, so Rue went and snatched it back away from her, and Revy sat down on the floor and kicked her little, she's only 1.5 years, you guys, she's this little, and she kicked her feet and screamed bloody murder. Her little hands were like this. Ah! And the thing is that from a 1.5-year-old, we expect it, right? And this is where it gets us, because we don't expect that coming from an adult. But remember, there's a lot of people who don't understand boundaries and haven't done their boundary work. And that's how they're going to react to you. Like a 2-year-old, kicking and screaming. And everything else that a 2-year-old does. Another thing that Revy does is she slams the doors. It's her favorite thing to do. How many of you have slammed the door in your homes or in your life before? Okay, good. I'm glad to know I'm not the only one. But anybody who deprives them of their wishes, they will deem you as bad and become angry. Angry people genuinely have a character problem. And listen, if you give in to it and if you reinforce it, it comes back tomorrow. And then you give in to it and you reinforce it and it comes back tomorrow. And then it comes back the next day and the next day, to where you get to feeling like, oh, I can't take this. Isn't it so much easier to set a boundary and to keep the boundary regardless of if they're angry or not? It is. But we have to learn several things. Number one, the person getting angry with you has the problem. Do you hear me? The person getting angry with you, it's their problem. Their anger is theirs. They have to own their problem. Maintaining a boundary is good for them. It will teach them what they've never learned to do, and that is to respect other people. You realize that people who don't have boundaries or people who can't accept your limits, they've never learned to respect another person because they enmesh. And chances are they don't respect themselves either, truly. Second thing, anger is only a feeling inside of the other person. It cannot, listen, it cannot get inside of you unless you take your boundary down. Oh, they're so angry with me. I can't do this. This is just horrible. Don't let their anger get inside of you. Leave it in their yard. Don't keep opening your door and say, throw all your trash on me. It's so wonderful, even though it stinks to high heaven and it causes me so much stress and anxiety and depression and every other thing. Don't own someone else's anger. Don't take it on you. Staying separate from another's anger is vital. Vital. If you rescue or take it on yourself, the angry person will never get better. And you will always be in bondage to them. You will always be in your property cleaning up their trash. You guys, God didn't create it that way. He did not create it to where we are picking up other people's trash constantly. Number three, do not let anger be a cue for you to do something. People without boundaries respond to the anger of others. They rescue. I'm a rescuer. They seek approval. I've been a approval seeker. Or get angry themselves. I'm just going to tell them myself really quick. Jason was playing with this long corded thing and hitting Rue upside the head. And she runs at him and attacks him and hits him. I said, Jason, stop. And he said, well, she hit me first. And I said, I know, but you should not teach her to react. Right as I said that, he took that thing and he whipped her and it went right across her face. And you could tell it hurt her. And just like that, I reached back, boom, and hit him square in the belly. And of course, my adult children started laughing. And they're like, oh, Mom didn't have any boundaries. And I didn't. I reacted in anger to his anger. Isn't that crazy how we do that? Good boundaries say, I'm not going to react. I'm going to set limits. I'm going to set a consequence for that. All right. So we do not let an out-of-control person be the cue for us to change our course. What kind of power is in that, you guys? When someone is mad, when someone is angry, when someone is going off, I'm not going to change my course. I'm going to keep going the way I'm going. What power? I want that in my life. I'm telling you. And I'm going to keep practicing until I get it. Number 4, make sure you have your support system in place. Before you go and begin setting limits, make sure you have a support, people that you can talk to, people that you can bounce stuff off of, people that you can say, is this worded right, or am I being manipulative, or is this a good boundary? Have that good support system with people. We do not learn boundaries in a vacuum. We just don't, which we're going to learn a little bit more about tonight. Number 5, do not allow the angry person to get you angry. Keep a loving stance while speaking the truth in love. I think that a lot of times, at least I'll say for me, I think that if I'm not going to let you get me angry, then I have to withdraw and shut down. We don't have to do that at all. Don't get angry, but speak the truth in love. Because remember, you're also helping that person. You're also helping them to learn limits when a majority of people do not understand limits. And then number 6, be prepared to use physical distance and other limits that enforce consequences. This one's hard, especially when you're dealing with family. You know, it's holiday season, and I just had a situation today where somebody had to set limits with their family. And the first thing that the family member did is act like a 2-year-old. First of all, let me just tell you that this family member was spewing, you need to, and you are, and all of this condemnation on a somebody. And this somebody came to me and said, I'm gonna set limits. I'm gonna set a boundary. And so as soon as that happened, the family member then did what toxic family members do and go to triangulation, started telling the whole family, this person is this person is that, this person is the other. So understand that sometimes, and it's holiday season, you guys, and sometimes there's gonna have to be a physical distance, and that's hard. That is really, really, really hard. But it's also hard to be stuck and enmeshed in the middle of a toxic relationship. So I'm not telling you guys it's easy. I'm not standing up here saying, oh, just get away from them and have nothing to do with your family. I'm not saying that at all. But sometimes being away physically is essential. Essential. Let that just sit. Okay, the next thing that people use is guilt messages. How could you do this to me after all that I have done for you? Do you know everything I've done for you? We also call this manipulation, by the way. It seems that you could think about someone other than yourself for once. If you really loved me, you would make this telephone call for me. How can you abandon the family like this? You guys, this is all manipulation and guilt messages. All designed to what? To make you pull down your boundary and let that person throw all their trash in your yard. Don't let the guilt messages work. Okay, these ones are a little bit harder, which there's a bunch of examples there in your book, but let's skip down really quick to the ones that are dressed up like God talk. These are my favorite. Oh my goodness. How can you call yourself a Christian? Doesn't the Bible say to honor your parents? You must really have a spiritual problem to be acting this way. Trying to make you feel guilty about your choices. Trying to make you feel bad. Remember, when someone doesn't have boundaries, they try to make other people feel bad. Because who really feels bad? That person. And that's what they're projecting onto other people. Instead of dealing with what's going on inside of them and getting connected to love, they say, I'm bad, so they shove it all down. And when we shove it all down, we project it onto everybody else. So I'm going to try to make you feel bad, and you feel bad, and you feel bad when I can't control you. Truth is, I can't control me. Truth is, I need to learn boundaries for myself. Okay, so here's what we have to do. He gives 6 different things. You got to recognize the guilt messages. Recognize when someone is trying to manipulate you. And then you need to, the guilt messages are really anger in disguise. So understand, the person who's trying to guilt you or trying to make you feel bad, they're angry. That's what it gets down to. And their guilt messages hide sadness and hurt. I want everyone to understand this. It is much more appropriate in the culture in which we live to put on anger than it is to be vulnerable and say, I'm sad and I'm hurt, isn't it? It's our go-to. I can just get angry and everybody will just kind of back away and do what I want them to do. But understand, what you're covering up is anger and hurt. We all need to deal with that junk inside of us. The next one, if guilt works on you, if it's working on you, recognize that's your problem and not theirs. If they're putting guilt on you and you're pulling your boundaries down, who needs to own that? The one pulling their boundary down. Yes, absolutely. And the next one is do not explain or justify. And then 6, be assertive and interpret their messages as being about their feelings. So he gives an example. I understand that you are very unhappy. You know what we normally do? Well, I don't know why you're so ticked off at me. Blah, 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 blah. Instead of doing that, say, you know what? I understand that you are unhappy, but I'm not going to change my stance. Here's my stance, okay? So empathize with their distress, but make it clear that it is their distress and not yours. Love and limits are the only clear boundaries. If you react, you have lost your boundary. So tonight at my house, when I reacted on Jason, I lost my boundary and I had to own that. Okay, next one, consequences and counter moves. You do face risk in setting boundaries, don't we? There can be loss of relationships. There can be loss of money, a loss of a babysitter. But remember, healthy people want discipline and they respond to limits. Unhealthy people run over the limits. Unhealthy people manipulate. Unhealthy people act like a 2-year-old. But healthy people, they want the discipline. They want the limits. So in other words, I'm going to feel very safe with you if I know that you'll set a limit with me, that I know that you'll say, hey, this far and no further. Then I feel safe. If not, if you're letting me enmesh with you, then I know that I'm not safe with you. So understand that boundaries is for love, not only for yourself, but also for other people. People who don't want limits, they have character disorders, and we see a lot of those around the world today. They don't want to take responsibility for their own action and lives. And often the way that you can tell these people, the people who don't want to take responsibility for their own actions and lives, they're putting all of it onto you to take responsibility for their actions and their lives. Just understand that. Counter moves to your boundary settings are tough to battle. Again, I'm going to tell you guys, this is tough. It's not easy. It's like learning a brand new language. It's tough to battle, but God will be there to match your efforts as you work out your salvation. The next one, this one is a hard one. Me and Cassie were talking about this one this morning. Real need. When someone comes to you with a legitimate need, like I really need you to watch my kids. I'm in a bind. I really need you to do this. And having to tell them no, it's tough, isn't it? Have you guys had to tell people with legitimate need no? I think all of us have. Someone may have a legitimate need and it break your heart to say no, but empathize with their need and understand that their need is valid. So in other words, don't say, well, sorry, too bad for you. It must suck for you. Don't say that. Say, you know what? I understand. You need a babysitter, and I get that you're in a bind. I'm so sorry, and I'm not able to do it, but I'm going to pray right now that God sends somebody. Start making phone calls, and, we can come in alongside them and help them through, even if we have to set a limit and say no. Oftentimes, we will say yes to someone who has a legitimate need and say no to our own families or our first ministry. Oftentimes, we'll say yes to the world and no to our first ministry. So think about that. Keep that in the back of your mind when we're talking about real need. Next one, internal resistance. We have to be able to say no to the self-defeating or sinful behaviors that want to have dominion over us. Human need. When we have unmet needs, how many of you were raised in perfectly healthy homes with all of your legitimate needs met? Love, acceptance, worth, security, all of those needs met. So we have some unmet needs, don't we? Whose responsibility is it to ask for those needs? And yet we want people to be mind readers, don't we? I know I do for years. And Jason would be like, just tell me, I have no idea. And half the time, it's because I wasn't doing my inner work. I wasn't getting down to the root of things. I was just exposing my anger and my negativity and what he wasn't doing right. I was doing that instead of doing my inner work and saying, you know what? I need to connect with you. Can we sit nowadays? In fact, I just did this not long ago. I asked Jason. He is in his reffing season right now. So I'll just give you an example of this week. So he works all day, goes to work early in the morning, works all day. Monday night, he has council meeting, and he gets home about 9:45. Tuesday night, basketball games. Wednesday night, basketball games. Thursday night, basketball games. Friday night, basketball games. Saturday night, Ignite. And then it starts all over again. So I said to him, because I have all of us have a legitimate need, right, to be loved. And one of my needs is to be connected. And so I said to him, can we sit down, and whether it is 15 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, I would love, can we sit down without our phones, with all distractions, everybody shut out of our room, wherever we need to go, and have a conversation? And then I asked him legitimate things. Can we talk about what we're facing right now, what our fears are, what we're loving right now, what music we're listening to? Can we do that? And so that's what we've started to do. But if I hadn't have asked for that from him, The world is busy and loud. The world just gets to chugging and chugging and chugging and chugging. And if we're not taking care of these needs and owning these needs, then we are going to try to get them in the most unloving ways that we possibly can. If we feel rejection, if we feel that spirit of rejection, do you know what our go-to method is? We're going to reject before anyone can reject us. If we feel abandoned, if we feel like someone has walked out on us, you know what we're going to do? We're going to walk out before they can. So understand, these are needs that we have to own and we have to ask for. But let me tell you this, ask for them in love. If we ask for them, let's say that I said to Jason, you are a workaholic and I can't stand it. I can't stand you when you work this much and blah, 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 blah. Would that really make him want to sit down and have a conversation with me? He'd be like, girlfriend, now you know why I'm a workaholic. Look at that mouth on you. So we have to own how we're asking too. And I'm going to say it again. I'm not telling you this stuff is easy, because it's not. We have to learn a new way, but it is our responsibility to own it. Okay, fear of the unknown. Being controlled by others is a safe prison. Being controlled by others, I'm used to it. This is the way it's been since I was little. I'm 50 years old, and if my mom wants to stop over unexpectedly and I have to give up my whole night with my family, at least I expect it. Comfortable dysfunction. Let's just call it that. I'm comfortable in my dysfunction because setting boundaries puts me into a space that I'm not familiar with. I've never been here before. What's going to happen? Is there going to be a separateness between me and my mom? And I'm just giving you guys an example. It's not really with me and my mom, but this is what our fears are. Is there going to be a separateness? Is she going to stop coming over? No. You know what she'll do? Well, either that, if she doesn't respect your boundaries, or she'll call. Hey, is tonight a good night? Yeah, it is a good night. Let's go do this. So the fear of the unknown often keeps us comfortable in our dysfunction. A lot of people don't like change. Change is hard for a lot of people, but we've got to have it because it's a prison. When people are throwing their trash into our yard 24/7, just because we get used to the stink doesn't mean that it's a proper life. Doesn't mean that it's a good life. Doesn't mean that it is a fulfilled life that God wants us to have. So start putting up the boundaries and going into the unknown. Unforgiveness. To not forgive is the most destructive thing that we can do. Sorry, I'm one behind, aren't I? Unforgiveness. To not forgive is the most destructive thing that we can do for our own lives. Forgiveness means letting go of something that someone owes you. Forgiveness is freedom from the past and freedom from the abusive person who hurt you. We have to acknowledge that we will never get from the person what was owed to us. And you guys, sometimes it's an entire childhood. I was owed a childhood. I was owed a parent that loved me. I was owed for my spouse not to cheat on me. I was owed. At some point, you have to say, okay, I'm not going to get that. We have to live in reality and say, okay, I'm going to forgive that. I'm going to forgive what they owed, and I'm going to get it off of my account. And then we have to grieve. Do you guys realize that a life of boundaries is a life of grieving? But blessed are those that mourn. That means that you're healthy. If you're living regularly to where you're letting yourself feel pain, you guys, far too long do we get into pain, and what do we do with that? I got to do whatever I have to do to get out of this pain. And most of the time we turn to destructive habits. Most of the time either we give in and become compliant, or we use all sorts of things. But at some point you're going to have to allow yourself to feel the hurt. It hurt that I didn't get a childhood. It hurt that my spouse cheated on me. It hurt when I went through that divorce. It hurt. And let yourself feel that and grieve it. Forgiveness has to do with the past, and reconciliation and boundaries have to do with the future. But limits guard my property until someone has repented and can be trusted again. I think a lot of times people think, well, if I forgive, I have to pull down my boundary and let them barrage me with their garbage again. No, you do not. Forgiveness means that I let them off the hook, but that does not mean, that's just the beginning of our boundaries. That does not mean we put our boundaries down. If people sin against us, we are always, the Bible says, always, always, always forgive them. But I want to be around people who honestly fail me, not dishonestly deny that they have hurt me and have no intent to do any better. So in other words, you don't open that gate if there's no repentance. Don't open that gate to them and say, come throw all your trash on me all over again. Relationships have to be repentant, confessing one to another. If people are owning their sin, they are learning through failure. I don't know about you guys, but I could be around 20 people who are falling down and asking for forgiveness, owning what they did and getting back up going forward. Then I could be around 20 people that pretend like they're perfect and walk around hurting people but never owning it. Those are scary people, aren't they? People who never own their garbage are very, very scary people. But unforgiveness destroys boundaries and forgiveness creates them. Isn't that beautiful? It creates them, gets the bad debt off of your account. External focus says I can never be okay until that person changes. I'll just never be okay until my husband is blah, blah, blah. I'll never be okay until my wife is blah, blah, blah. I'll never be okay until my boss is healthy. I'll never be okay until my kid gets clean. You guys, they say that addiction is a family disease, and here's why. I will never as a mother ever be okay as long as my son is on drugs. You realize that is no boundaries whatsoever. That is me having absolutely no limits. So responsibility begins with an internal focus on confession and repentance. Internal focus on confession and repentance. Confess the ways that you are wanting to keep your boundarylessness going and turn from those ways. So confess. You know what? It would be so much easier right now if I just gave in and let them call me and tell me what a piece of garbage I am every day. It'd be so much, but I don't want to do that. I know it would be easier, but you know what? I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be all right. Even if they continue doing their thing, I'm going to be okay with setting a boundary, even if it means they don't talk to me anymore. I'm all right. Even if they continue in their drug addiction and I love them, but I'm going to be okay and it's not going to affect me any longer. Easy? Not at all. Hard, very, very hard. But we have to look at ourselves and face the internal resistance of wanting the problem to be on the outside of me. You guys, it's super duper duper easy to constantly be saying, you're the problem, and you're the problem, and I'd be okay if it wasn't for you, and I'd be okay if it wasn't for you, and I'd be okay. It's so easy to do that, but such a lack of boundaries. Okay, next one, guilt. Guilt is a tough one. It's a state of internal condemnation. What does this sound like in your head? What does internal condemnation sound like in your head? Anybody? You guys don't have any internal condemnation? You're not good enough. Excellent. What else, Linda? Oh, okay. Your thoughts? Yes. What do they look like? Tell me a thought. What's the condemnation? What does that look like on the inside of us, in our thoughts? Don't do enough. Not good enough. You're stupid. You're worthless. This is internal condemnation. Jesus died to put us in a state of no condemnation. We are to be motivated by love, and then once we are motivated by love, then we will experience godly sorrow. It's hard to love from a condemned state. So if you're condemning yourself, you're not loving. Number one, you're not loving yourself, and number two, you're not loving your neighbor. Did everyone hear me? If you're condemning yourself, you're not loving. Godly sorrow looks at the hurt that we have caused someone else, not as us being bad. So here's what guilt and shame do. I'm bad. I'm defective. Something's wrong with me. Me. I can't believe I did this. I. And where does the person that you hurt sit in that equation? Nowhere. Godly sorrow says, I am so sorry I hurt you. I'm so sorry your heart is broken because of my choices. So that's what godly sorrow looks like. But guilt will keep you from doing what is right and keep us stuck. And the way I look at stuck, this is just the way my brain pictures it. The way I look at stuck is on a merry-go-round. Where does a merry-go-round go? That's stuck to me. Let's just keep on doing this over and over and over and expecting a different result, which is the definition of insanity. And a lot of us have been there, right? The guilt is your problem. No one can make you feel guilty, nor should they hold that power over you. Do you know why people can hold that power over us? Because we are condemning ourselves. If we are not condemning ourselves, then people can say something to us and we won't go straight into what is wrong with me. I'm so bad. We will go into, I'm going to connect and make amends. Make sense? Okay, all right. So it comes from a childhood when the parent seemed so powerful. And in this case, you have never come out from under that critical parent. And in fact, you become the critical parent. That you take that on. A part of you agrees with the guilt message that someone may give you because it taps into the strong parental messages in your emotional brain. Being manipulated is your problem. So we have to own our guilt, get into a support system, begin to examine where those guilt messages come from, become aware of your anger, forgive the controller, role play. I like doing role play. And I was telling Cass this morning that the last time that we did this class, we did it in the afternoon. And so we had a long extended period of time. And so on each of these, we would role play. And it makes it bearable. Like when you begin to role play and then you're like, okay, well, I can expect to hear those guilt messages when I actually do set a boundary. And so it helps. You guys get with someone that you trust and role play. Nika and I did this today. We role played a little bit, and she was able to process through because I just started slamming. Was I slamming guilt on you today? I just started giving her guilt messages. Well, you're this, well, you're that, and so she got to role play with me. So do that with somebody. It's really good. It honestly is. Take in new healthy information. It's up to you what you take in, right? And then acquire guilt. You have to practice disobeying your parental conscience to get well. So in other words, you're going to have to feel guilty sometimes and continue having your boundary over and over and over and over as the guilt gets less and less and less and less. But let me tell you, if guilt messages have worked on you before, don't expect yourself not to feel them as you start to practice, because you're going to feel guilty. But let yourself feel guilty and keep the boundary, okay? Next one, abandonment fears. Taking a stand in a vacuum. Boundaries come after bonding. Boundaries do not come before bonding. Babies have to be secure, so learning separateness will not be too frightening. They have enough love inside of them to risk setting boundaries and gaining independence. So boundaries are not built in a vacuum. It has to be with people. It has to be with one another. And I would suggest to you to get with safe people and begin practicing your boundaries. Begin practicing little no's. Begin practicing with people who will respect your boundaries. Being rooted and grounded in love in the body of Christ and with God will be the developmental fuel that you'll need to risk boundary setting. So we know, you guys, that this chapter is about trouble. You're like, holy cow, I didn't realize when I began setting boundaries that I would have all this trouble. But the Bible tells us in this world you will have tribulation. But, everyone say but. Do not fear. Because he has overcome the world. He has given us the ability to have this Bible perspective. The journey is always going to be riddled with trouble. always, but also with the promise of our shepherd to carry us through if we do our part. So it's time that we do our part. Amen? All right, next chapter. How to measure success. All right, so how we get from point A, which all of us started in what we'll call boundarylessness. I don't think that is an actual word, but it is tonight. Boundaryless to point B, mature boundaries. Don't we all want that? I know I do. I want to have mature boundaries. I want to be able to be able to love in freedom constantly. Okay, this first one might really surprise you. Number 1, resentment. What? You're teaching us that we're supposed to have resentment? What on earth? Our early warning signs are resentment. So I'm just going to go through the story of Randy, which he tells about. Randy had never felt irritated by his best friend, Will. Even though Will, he teased and humiliated Randy in front of all their friends constantly. But Randy he never felt irritated. Randy was good-natured and came from a family that avoided conflict and disagreement. But he was suddenly embarrassed and hurt, and he did not understand where it came from. One of the first signs that you are developing boundaries is resentment, frustration, or anger when someone begins to roll over your boundary. Just like a radar signals the approach of a foreign missile, your anger can alert you to boundary violations in your life. So, Randy began seeing Dr. Cloud in his 30s with an eating disorder. And I'll tell you, a lot of people, what they want to do is they want to focus and go to work on treating the symptoms. Let's put you on a diet. Let's get you on keto. Let's do this. They didn't do that. They went straight for the root of things. The therapist asked him how he reacted to controlling people in his life. Get this, you guys. Get this picture in your head. An eating disorder, and the root work is how you are reacting to controlling people in your life. Randy thought about his friend Will and his memories of the things that Will had said to him that carried hurt, anger, and resentment. They were the seeds of boundaries in Randy's life. People who cannot get angry when they are being violated, manipulated, or controlled have a genuine handicap. So this is the way that Randy was raised. And so he just thought it was normal when people would railroad him and say awful things to him, embarrassing things to him. He just thought it was normal. No warning lights alert them to boundary problems when they're handicapped. This light, when functioning properly, should turn on quickly when you're being attacked. The Bible often describes angers in terms of heat. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses. The Lord's anger burned against the land. Anger is like a fire that shoots up within your heart, letting you know that there is a problem to confront. Not a problem to withdraw. Not a problem to bury. Not a problem to get aggressive and try to manipulate someone, but a problem to confront. An inability to get angry is often a sign that we are afraid of the separateness that comes with telling the truth. Sometimes we use manipulation or withdraw love, like I just said. We fear that telling our unhappiness about the relationship will damage the relationship. But when we acknowledge the truth is always our friend, we give ourselves permission to be angry. Let's say that someone was to say to you, I can't stand you and I don't want you in my life anymore, out of anger. We could withdraw. Fine, I don't need you. Whatever. Or we could confront and say, that hurts me. But listen, here's where we don't like to get vulnerable, guys. That hurts my heart because I really love you. You see what that does? Is it pulls down the walls inside the other person. So what we do is we begin either withdrawing, like Jesse just gave us a perfect example. Fine, bye, later, Felicia, out of my life you go. Or we get into a rage and we tell them, well, you're a creep and I don't want nothing to do with you. And you're a this and you have it all in your head, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Neither one of those are right. Get mad enough to say, listen, This hurts me. Let's have a conversation about this, but not an angry conversation, not a condemning conversation, a truthful, vulnerable conversation. In Will's case, what was the root hurt there? What could he have said to his friend or Randy? What could Randy have said to Will? Well, when we get around people and you put me down, that really hurts me. It makes me feel disrespected and lesser as a man. Could you work on that? You see what that would have done inside of Will? Would have pulled his walls down and been like, oh, heck yeah, man. Of course I didn't mean anything by it. I'm sorry. Gives the other person a chance to have amends. And you guys, this is how a functional relationship works. But sadly, we feel so unbonded to people that we're terrified. And so it's just easier just to tap or to get angry. And neither one of those will ever get us what we want, will they? Neither one will get us what we want. Okay, next one. Step 2, a change of tastes, becoming drawn to boundary lovers. So Tammy and Scott decided to change churches and reflected back on, and here was the deal. Their church was doctrinally sound, perfect, and had active fellowship, perfect. However, leadership wanted the church people to be at every single service offered at the church and would shame them if they didn't make it. Tammy called her small group leader and told her that they were unable to make it because they had friends coming in that were from out of town, and the small group leader replied with this, and I want you guys to see if there's anything wrong with this. I think there's a problem in commitment here. If it meant something to you, you would be here. Is there a problem with that? Manipulation, guilt messages. Yes, there's a problem with that. Now, a year later, they were attending a church that was also active and encouraged lots of involvement, but no one became critical or judgmental when members needed time off. Isn't that beautiful? Can people accept your no? If you say no, can people accept those limits? Or do they go straight into manipulation? People with immature limit-setting abilities often find themselves involved with boundary busters. But as boundary-injured individuals begin developing their own boundaries, they become attracted to people who can hear their no without being critical or getting hurt. This is why we need to practice our no with one another. We need to practice our boundary setting, and it can start with little no's. That's okay. We need to practice them. People who say, okay, we'll miss you, but see you next time. Isn't that how we should react to one another? It's your business why you're going to miss something. It's not my business, nor should I enmesh to where I have to force you or manipulate you to do anything. That's not right. When we find relationships in which we have the freedom to set limits, something wonderful happens. In addition to the freedom to say no, we find the freedom to say a wholehearted, unconflicted, gratitude-driven yes. Isn't that beautiful? We can say no, and wholeheartedly, we can also say yes to others. We become attracted to boundary lovers because in them we find permission to be honest, to be authentic, to be loving individuals. We can just be ourselves. We don't have to be controlled by other people. We don't have to, if they're angry, we don't have to take on their anger. We can just be our authentic selves. To a boundary-injured person, though, people who say no can at times seem cold and harsh, can't they? Especially if you haven't ever heard no your whole entire life. If you've been raised to always hear a bunch of yeses, it can seem cold and harsh at first. But just understand it's not. No is healthy. No is a one-word sentence, and it's good. We need to join with boundary lovers in deep, meaningful attachments. Boundaries cannot develop again in a vacuum. Number 3, joining the family. This is a crucial phase in boundary development. Just as it is with spiritual development, boundaries cannot be worked out in a vacuum. We need others with the same biblical values of limit setting and responsibility. You guys, I want you to take into consideration in your mind, take into consideration week after week who has been in here learning boundaries, and practice with them. Begin to form some attachments. Begin to get together and have dinners together. Because understand that they're trying to work at boundaries also. And join the family. Say to them, listen, I'm trying to work out my boundaries. And so just so that you'll know, if I say no to you today, you'll know what I'm doing. So we go, let's just role play for a second. We go to a restaurant and I say, Nika, do you want our usual? We normally get cherry cake. And she says, or cherry pie. And she says, no, I don't want cherry pie, Maria. What? Well, you always get cherry pie. Why? Why don't you want cherry pie today? Not in the mood for pie. And I say, oh, okay, cool. That's how you start. I'm just giving an example. That's how you start. Begin practicing saying your no's with one another. Jesus defined fellowship as 2 or 3 gathered together in his name. He is there in the midst. You guys know why small groups are so effective, why recovery groups are so effective, because it's small groups, and in the midst of them is Jesus, and Jesus is teaching them. So I encourage you guys, get into a small group. We ought to make a small group of learning boundaries and give one another permission to practice on one another. Number 4, treasuring our treasures. After you feel safe being around people who believe that grace and truth are good, your value will begin to change. You will begin seeing that taking responsibility for yourself is healthy and for other adults is unhealthy. You do not take responsibility for another adult. You take responsibility for who? Absolutely. Many people have been told their whole lives that nurturing and maintaining their souls is selfish and wrong, especially if you were raised in religion. They told you that was selfish. You don't maintain everything that is within your property. You don't take care of your feelings, your thoughts, your behaviors, your attitudes, your body, your resources. Religion will tell you that it's carnal to own those or to take care of those. If we don't take care of those, who do we expect to take care of them? We try to get it from everybody else, don't we? They're within our property. We have got to take care of them. They place little value on taking care of the things that are within their property. And we've got to learn to treasure our treasures. We've got to learn that understand your feelings. They don't need to make the calls for your life, but you need to validate your feelings first. If you are invalidating your feelings, then when someone tries to validate your feelings, you'll invalidate them. So validate your feelings. Okay, I'm feeling a little blue. Let me do some root work on this. Own them and then process through them. That's the way that we get through them. A lot of people, they have feelings. Well, I feel mad, so I'm going to go scream at everybody. That's not owning my feelings, is it? We have to own and care for what's inside of our property line, our time, our behaviors. You've got to own those. You've got to know where they've come from. A lot of times we were modeled horrible behaviors from the time we were real little. And now we're adult women, and when we act with these horrible behaviors, people push away from us. Who has to own that? I have to value that. I have to value that treasure, because you guys, behavior in godly behavior is one of the most beautiful things that we have to offer one another, isn't it? Beautiful, beautiful. But first, we have to own it. So we love because he first loved us. We learn to be loving because we are loved. Grace has to come from the outside for us to develop it on the inside. The opposite side of this is also true. We can't love if we aren't loved. We can't value or treasure our souls when they haven't been valued or treasured. Our basic sense of ourselves, or what is real and true about us, comes from our significant primary relationships. How important is it who you have in your boat? How important is it who you have speaking into your life? Because a lot of us were not grown with that from the time we were little. The primary people in our lives, taught us complete opposite of this. And so as we get older, it's important to treasure your treasures. This is why many people who were unloved in childhood can be inundated by loving, caring people in their adult years, yet not be able to shake a deep sense of being worthless and unlovable, no matter how much people say or show them love. It's like, I was talking to Linda today, we were talking about how we can become a bottomless pit. People can tell us all this, we can get validation, and it has nowhere to land because we haven't treasured our treasures. We haven't spoken that into ourselves. People might speak it all day long, but until we believe it, until we internalize it, and until that becomes our inner monologue, we'll never believe it, and we'll never be able to reciprocate and pour out love. When we begin to value getting well, recovery, and developing ourselves into the image of God, a shift occurs. We begin desiring a return on God's investment. Taking care of ourselves becomes important. You see, the problem with Randy is taking care of himself was never important to his family of origin. His family of origin just taught him to be an avoidant, avoid everything. So when he got older, he had this awful eating disorder, which we see all around the world today, and he never treasured what was a treasure in his life. You cannot love others unless you have received love inside yourself. When's the right time to begin practicing this? The next thought that dips into this right here. Is it of God? Is it of faith? Are you speaking the image of God over your life? Are you internalizing the love of the Father? Are you understanding that He accepts you wholly and completely? Are you accepting the worth that you don't get to decide? Jesus decided your worth. You realize that? When Jesus came and died on the cross for you and I, He decided what you were worthy of. He decided your worth. And then security. God, I'm secure in you. I don't have to worry about falling down. I am secure. I can practice. I can jump into this, and I'm secure in your love. Begin internalizing. You guys, this is not a work that anybody can do for you. People can tell you you're the smartest, most beautiful, talented, wonderful person that walked the face of the earth. But if you don't believe it, it won't make a hill of beans. If you don't believe it, you won't be able to get into these secure attachments, these bonds that we so deeply want. Who's keeping us from that? Yep. What you're allowing, what you're feeding, what you're internalizing. Whatever we don't value, we don't guard. If you don't value your life, you're just going to let any sin walk in. If you don't value your life, you'll just go dip into whatever you feel like dipping into because you don't care. And we know sin costs us. We've got to value our lives, each of us. You put more security around a bank than you do a junkyard. Guys, it's time we stop treating our lives like it's a junkyard. And that's what boundaries do. Boundaries say, this is a bank. And this bank has gates. And I will choose when I open the gates and when I close the gates. And I will no longer be everybody's junkyard to come and throw and pile all their junk on. But the first thing you got to do is begin internalizing what the Father has said about you and what He has done for you. Number 5, practicing baby knows. Growth is setting emotional boundaries must always be at a rate that takes into account your past injuries. So understand, we all have been injured. Otherwise, you could fail massively before you have solid enough boundaries. So if you have past injuries, let's just talk about rejection, because I think that's an easy one for all of us to understand. If you have past rejection and you say a big no to somebody, like I will not be putting up with that, and they reject you, that could absolutely devastate you, can't it? A lot of us have been there. So it's a lot wiser to practice baby no's on people that you're secure with, people that you know are not going to run out on you when you fail. Practice those baby no's. Don't be impatient and rip off the training wheels before you learn to ride the bike. So just go slow. Just go slow, because it will hurt, I promise you. But baby no's get you to where you're prepared for the big no's. Ask your closest friends if you can practice on them. Oh, let me just say really quick. True intimacy is based or built on the freedom to disagree. True intimacy is built on the freedom to disagree. Did you guys know that most of the time, men and women are attracted to their opposites? And then they get together and try to make them be just like them? True intimacy is you're strong in this area where I'm weak, and I'm strong in this area where you're weak, and we put these two wholes together, and we are a dynamic team. We don't always agree. We see things differently, but we're together going forward, each of us an individual in unity. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that what all of us want? It's what I want. Okay, rejoice in the guilty feelings. This one's hard. Rejoicing in the guilty feelings means that you are practicing boundaries. And again, we already kind of went over this in the last chapter. You're going to feel guilty at first, aren't you? When you're giving your nose to people, I really need you to babysit. I have no one to babysit. And you say no all day long. Chances are you're going to be like, man, I just let them down. Man, they're going to be mad at me. It's okay. Keep your boundary up. Don't let it down. The next one, step 7, practicing your grown-up nose. So once you get acquainted with the baby nose and you begin to be okay with accepting the guilty feelings, then practice the big nose. What is your number one boundary buster? Who is the foremost person in your life with whom it's difficult to set limits? This is where you start with your big nose. This step deals with your complicated, difficult relationships. This is step 7 on purpose because we have to do the previous steps first, because setting important limits with significant people is the fruit of much work and much maturing. If you say a big no before you mature, then when they reject you, you're going to go right into hiding and right into, I'm done, I'm tapping out, I can't take this, and your boundaries are going to go down and you're going to enmesh again and do all the things that you don't want to do. So this is step 7 on purpose. Do the other steps first. Understand that our target is maturity in every single one of us. The ability to love successfully and to work successfully the way that God does. Oh, I love that. I think that's beautiful. Step 8. We are going to make it. Yay. Rejoicing in the absence of guilty feelings. So after you've practiced a while and you have felt guilty and man, I know they're probably upset with me and I feel so bad. Then going into saying your big no's to the relationships that have plowed your boundaries over for years, then you're going to be able to, okay, I don't feel guilty anymore. I'm owning my life. I'm owning my nose, and it is okay. It is A-okay. And this is a deep, deep work, you guys. Now you have shifted allegiance spiritually. When you no longer feel guilty, you don't have to withdraw. You don't have to rage on someone. You can actually say your no. You can actually confront things. Now is when you have shifted allegiance spiritually and emotionally. You have changed from listening to your inner critical parent to responding to biblical truths. These values are being internalized, and the heart has somewhere to go for self-evaluation beside a critical consciousness. Number 9, loving the boundaries of others. If we expect others to respect our boundaries, we need to respect theirs. Number 1, loving others' boundaries confronts our selfish and omnipotence. When we are concerned about protecting the treasures of others, we work against our self-centeredness. Number 2, loving others' boundaries increases our capacity to care about others. It's difficult to love another when we experience their resistance, confrontation, and separateness. When we can love and respect the boundaries of others, we accomplish 2 things. Number 1, we genuinely care about that other person. We genuinely do. Because if we didn't, we don't gain anything. We gain nothing by helping someone tell us no. It just helps them deprive us better. Number 2, it teaches us empathy. We could all use more empathy. We live in a society today that has absolutely no empathy whatsoever. We need to treat others the way we want to be treated. We don't return evil for evil. We don't act just like them. Well, they rejected me, so I'm going to reject them. Well, they were rude to me, so I'm going to be rude to them. We don't do that. We treat others the way we ourselves want to be treated. And number 10, freeing our no and our yes. If we are unsure of a decision, what should the answer always be? No. What is the answer usually when we're unsure of our decision? Yes. Most people with underdeveloped limit setting, when they are unsure about a decision, will say yes. And when you are as free to say no as you are free to say yes, you are well on your way to boundary maturity. There's no conflict, no second thought, no hesitation in using either word. Either one is fine. Think of the last time that you were asked for something from someone. Maybe your time that you didn't have to give. If you don't have boundaries, what do? Okay, yes. You give in. There you go. And a lot of times, you guys, we end up letting the people down, don't we? Because we didn't have time to do it. You say, oh, man, I meant to do that. I'm so sorry I let you down. Wouldn't it have just been easier to say no so they could make other arrangements? So if we have boundaries in place, we're able to say no when we do not have time. So if you're unsure, always use no. Which is the most mature of these? No. Because it is more responsible to give out of our resources than to promise that which we might not be able to deliver. So, in other words, we have to calculate the cost. Boundary-injured individuals make promises, and then they do one of two things. They resentfully make good on them. They're mad. I can't believe I have to do this. I can't believe I have to take this dinner to these people. I have no time, and I have to I have to go run my kids to soccer, and I have to go grocery shopping, and I have to do this, and they're resentful when they should have just said, no, I can't. Find someone that can. Or they fail on their promise. Yeah, I'll take them dinner Sunday. Oh, I forgot to take them dinner during the week. My bad. I was just too busy. One or two of those things. But boundary-developed people, they make good freely and gladly, or they don't promise at all. So let your yes be yes and your no be no. Don't promise too much before you have done your spiritual and emotional calculations. Number 11, mature boundaries. Obviously, you guys, this is where all of us want to get. We are valuing what is and treasuring what is on our treasure chest. We're goal setting. Individuals with mature boundaries aren't frantic. They aren't in a hurry, and they aren't out of control. I'm going to say that again. They are not frantic. They are not in a hurry, and they are not out of control. How many of you have sat or made an appointment? This was an easy one. Made an appointment with a doctor and went in, and you have a list this long to talk to the doctor about. And the doctor's like, yeah. So you have a runny nose? Yeah, it's probably they never look in your ears. They never look in your throat. They never do any tests. Nowadays, you walk in and they're like, we just need to COVID test you, and they walk out the room. How does that make you feel? Like, doctor, you need to get some boundaries. Holy cow. Or how about the ones that come in and sit down and they have their pad out there and they engage you in their eyes, and they're not frantic and they're not out of control, and they listen to you and they ask deep questions. And that's a person that has developed some boundaries. They have a direction in their lives, and they're steadily moving toward their personal goals. You guys, it's the end of the year. How many of you have already made some goals for next year? We should. Every one of us should make some goals. And you know, one of the goals can be, I need to become unhurried. I need to make more time for my family. That can be a goal. I need to develop boundaries. My goal last year, I hate to even tell you guys this, my goal last year was to become emotionally mature in 2022. Let me tell you how much work that has been. Set good goals. Set goals that you know that God wants you to reach. And it doesn't have to be just goals like that. It can be whatever is in your life. But plan ahead. Begin making goals for your life. The reward for their wise boundaries is the joy of desired fulfillment. If you set a goal, you're going to have some fulfillment in your life, aren't you? If you don't have any vision whatsoever, where are you going? You can take any road because it'll do. If you don't know where you're going, then just take any road. But we all want to have goals. We all want to have a place to end. We want to get to the end of our lives and say, like in 2 Timothy 4:6, I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. The days that we're living in, they are truly evil, aren't they? And there will be trials and there will be complications and people wanting you on their track and not on God's track and trying to pull from you and trying to get you to put down your boundaries and they want to throw their junk, treat you like a junkyard and throw all their crap in your property. We have to own it. You're a bank. You're not a junkyard. See yourself that way. Let's take ownership of our lives. All of us with mature limit, but those with mature limits understand that you have to make room to allow for that. Make room to allow for healthy goals. Make room to allow for slowing down and being in control of your life. Make room for boundary setting. Make room for practice. Make room for the things that you truly want in your life. And obviously, you guys, boundaries are never, ever, ever to punish another person. Do you realize that? They're never to punish someone. If you've got that picture in your head, then that's manipulation. And that is boundarylessness. It's out of love. It's truly out of love that we do this. We protect and develop our time, our talents, our treasures, and God allocates to us during our time on this planet all of these things. So God gives us the time that we have. Do you realize that all of our days are appointed? Did you guys know that? God's given us our time. What are we doing with it? God's given us our talents. What are you doing with them? God's given you your treasures. What are you doing with them? Let's develop good. Amen? The very last thing is a day in the life of boundaries. You guys can read that on your own. It started off with the story of Sherry, and it ends with the story of Sherry after she had done all of this work that is in this book. You guys, it took us how many weeks to do this? Like 8 or 9, something like that. It takes a little bit longer to develop these healthy, strong boundaries, but start practicing now. And I shouldn't even say that. You guys can develop boundaries tomorrow. I shouldn't say that, but begin practicing. And remember, part of practicing is making mistakes and learning from them and getting back up and going again. And I just want to personally make myself available to any of you that have been coming to this class that might have questions. I know that I speak with several of you and we work through stuff. We do the root work to get through stuff. So I want to personally make myself available. If you guys have any questions whatsoever, call me, hit me up, text me, whatever, and I'll make time. But look around at one another and begin making some connections and some healthy attachments. Get into a home group. Get into our recovery group. Whatever. Get into a small group, a place where you can begin practicing these things so that we can grow in maturity. Amen? Anybody have any thoughts? That's exactly what I said. I love that you said that. As soon as we finished the very first time that we did this, I said, I can't wait to start this all over again. And it becomes a language, just like learning. You guys, if I were to take any of you right now, which I hope none of you speak this language, but if I were to take any of you, put you in a plane, and go and drop you off in China, and nobody there spoke English, that's what we have done with this book. Yes, and we do, right? We're going to survive. We're all survivors in this room, but it's tough. It's like learning a brand new language. And the only way we learn it is practice, fail, get back up, practice, fail, get back up. But we are a maturing people, amen? All of us. So thank you all for staying the test of time, staying with us through all these weeks. It's been fun. It's been real and it's been fun, but it hasn't been real fun. It's brutal, right? But that's good. That's a good thing. Just remember, there's pain and growth. If there's no pain, you probably ain't growing. And it's always the darkest before the dawn. So just when you want to tap out, just trust that it's going to get better. You're practicing. Joy comes in the morning. Because he lives, we can face tomorrow. Start speaking that over you. Start preaching that over yourself as you're learning this brand new language. Any thoughts? You probably felt it well up within you, didn't you? Okay. Yep. 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 Excellent. Yeah. Yep. I understand. Yeah, I think that's a great way to take care of that. Right. Gotcha. 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 That's good practicing. Good, good, good. I love hearing stories like that. Amazing. Cassie, do you want to share one of your stories with your grandbabies?